Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Mindful Mornings at Sunrise. I'm Tracy Gerlach, the Director of Professional Business Development at Sunrise, and joining with us today is Andrew Barnett, a very dear and close friend, and he is doing some wonderful things. So, Andrew, can you introduce yourself and tell us what you're doing with your
Yeah,
life,
hi
with your
Tracy.
professionality? Hi.
Sure. Yeah, good morning. I'm a therapist. I'm a child therapist, and I practice mostly play therapy, and I live and work in Asheville, North Carolina.
Why child therapy? So Andrew and I met as wilderness guides at a wilderness therapy program outside of Asheville.
Mhm.
But you left us early to
I
get your
did.
master's degree.
Mhm.
Congratulations. Well done.
Thanks.
And then pretty soon after that, you decided on working with children and doing play therapy. What made you come to that conclusion?
Ooh, I've always liked working with kids. Like when we were at that program together, I always worked the younger kids group, the seasons group, and I tried being a teacher, but I didn't like actually trying to facilitate a large group of children. And I found play therapy and child therapy as a place where I could just be with children, witness their experience, allow them to flow through things, and just have this really sort of intimate, healing, therapeutic connection with a child that I didn't really know was possible, that you could just meet them where they were at and play. And it really just fits me like a glove. I really once I started doing it, I just can't stop. I really like it. Yeah.
It does fit you. You're a very youthful, playful person. That's what something I really cherish about you.
Yeah, so
So
I just get to play all day. So it's great. It's just great.
can you share with our audience out there who's maybe more used to traditional talk therapy what play
Sure.
therapy is and how it works with kids?
Yeah, so it's ultimately it's not that different than with talk therapy with adults, right? Like when you're an adult and you go into a therapeutic relationship, you're usually pulled to tell that therapist all about you and your feelings and your thoughts and your struggles and your successes. And when children come into a therapeutic space, especially from like 3 to 7, 8 or so, they're pulled to play. Like they walk into my space, they see all the toys, and so then they're allowed to, just like an adult with talk therapy, flow through whatever's coming up for them, play out dynamics in the play, have like a relationship with me where they're working out their issues with authority, and so the play allows them to project their internal state and their internal struggles onto the therapeutic relationship. And I like the play therapy modality a lot better for kids than talk therapy because talk seems often very uncomfortable for children. They don't like those serious, heavy conversations and it feels like too much for them. And I like having a therapeutic practice where I can honor that that's not the way that they need to heal or grow or move as a person. And so play therapy is more experiential in that way than it is like cognitive, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Can you
Yeah.
give us an example of a kid working something out through toys? Is there something that
Totally,
pops up?
totally.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, so Tracy, I'm so sorry. You cut off during that question. It was all like
Ah,
fuzzy. Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry to make you edit it.
no, you're fine. I was wondering why there was a weird
Yeah.
break. What was my question? Is
What does it look
there
like, I think?
Oh, here we go. Can you give us an example of what it looks like for a kid to work something out through play?
I mean, a lot of times it can be as simple as like I have a dollhouse and they put a family in that dollhouse, and it's pretty clear that the family dynamics between the different characters in the dollhouse represent some of their struggles, maybe inside of their family or their social world or whatever. But I think another example could be I have a lot of kids who come in who maybe don't trust adults, have a relationship with authority that is complicated, and so like I have handcuffs in my space, right? So they'll put me in handcuffs and I'm in prison and I have to stay in a certain area of the room and they get to sort of have this felt sense of power and control and authority. And then as we get more intimate with each other, as they trust me more, and as they feel more regulated inside of the space, then we don't do that anymore. Then maybe we'll move into something that's more collaborative or cooperative, and they get to express different parts of themselves. So the play really, it's just different for every kid. It's a really individualized kind of experience based on based on what they need to work through. But hopefully that sheds a little bit of light on like what it can look like.
It does. It does. And I don't know very many therapists who have been put into handcuffs by their clients. And
Yeah.
I don't know a lot of therapists that would particularly enjoy that idea.
Yeah, it takes a little bit of getting used to, right? There's some surrender, and obviously there's rules and limits inside of the space, right? Like I don't want to be hurt. You can't throw things at me. You can't just break stuff. But yeah, there's a lot more freedom in terms of what it can look like than a lot of forms of therapy for sure.
That's so interesting. And so
Mhm.
you not only have a private practice where you have, I assume, a full, especially right now, a full caseload of little ones that you work with,
Yeah.
but you also have a really cool podcast called Playtime. Will you tell us about Playtime?
Yeah, so Playtime started with different therapists I know who work with kids saying to me, like, I don't really know what I'm doing with these little ones. I think a lot of people come out of school and end up at a agency or something like that, and they get kid clients and they don't know what they're doing. So I started Playtime to both explain what play therapy is, and then it's kind of evolved into being maybe for anybody who cares about children. It's really just about sort of my process as I go about figuring out as a person, like, how do we help heal little ones? Like, what is the best environment for them to be in? What are optimal family situations? And so yeah, I'm just trying to figure out for myself, I think a lot of that stuff, and maybe it's helpful for to hear my process on playtime as I ramble about it. But yeah, that's what playtime is.
Well, I know I listen, and I know people in my life listen, and I know you've told me that you have had listeners from all over the world. So it seems
Yeah.
to be really helpful. And one episode in particular that I really connected with as
Hmm.
a positive psychology practitioner was episode 70, Joyas Foundation, I believe it was
Yeah.
called.
Yeah.
Um, and in that episode, you said a really, really powerful remark, and I'm going to read
Hmm.
it and see what you mean by it. Okay.
Sure. Sure.
So
Yeah.
you said, on some level, deep, heartfelt joy will fix literally everything.
Mm. Hmm.
That's a
Hmm.
bold, powerful statement, but I love
It's
it.
cool.
What are you meaning by that?
Ooh, what? It's so funny to hear a quote from your podcast, right? Because you're like, wow, is that me that said that? That's interesting. But what comes up for me when you repeat it back to me is that especially as like being a therapist, right, or a mental health professional, I think it's easy to get caught in like, okay, we're trying to meet these certain goals, so then you could be wanting to move the clients in a particular direction and not accepting where they are based on that. As a child therapist, you can get pressure from parents or other people, and I think when I'm really at my best and most healing as a therapeutic presence is when I just feel so lucky to be with this child that I'm with at the time, right? To have the opportunity to have this one on one time with them, to have the opportunity to have a role in their life that could be healing and therapeutic and provide them with whatever emotional supports that they need to evolve into whatever person they're going to evolve into. And so for me, like sinking back into that, just like, I'm just glad that you're here. And I'm glad that I'm here too. Like there's this joy component inside of that that I really do think is healing. And I think that being connected to that, whether you're a therapeutic professional or a parent or just like a person in the world, that I think there is some power and some lightness and some presence inside of that joyful state. And I think that's what I was trying to get at there.
Well, I listened to it multiple times just to make sure I was getting it right. And I think that's where you're getting at too.
Mhm.
Um, and I wrote my thesis on post traumatic growth and how to
Mhm.
cultivate post traumatic growth. And
Mhm.
even in the darkest of ourselves, we can have an ounce, a moment of joy. And
Yeah,
in that moment, you can gain healing or a spark of relief or just something that is helpful in that moment, even if it isn't going to solve all of your problems. It's still very, very, very helpful. Um,
totally,
so I
totally.
loved
Especially, yeah.
that.
Go ahead. Hmm.
Well, that's it. I just loved it. So, Andrew, here's my question because I know a lot of people listening or watching have children in their lives or come
Hmm.
into contact with them. So, as adults, our lives get so busy
Yeah.
and we have to think a lot, and there's a lot going on, and we have our own issues. So, how can we gain some presence or some mindfulness as we interact with kids, so that we don't forget that they are there and they are feeling what we're feeling, and our joy is influencing their joy, or our tension is influencing their tension. So is there a way that we can establish some more mindfulness in how we interact with children?
I hope so. I hope so. And I think it's a tricky question to answer, right? Because I think people can get distracted or disconnected from such a wide variety of reasons, right? There could be stress and a lot of things going on, or maybe there's just some tension in your relationship with your child at the time, and it doesn't feel easy. But I can name a couple things. Like I think something that I do personally in my practice is when I feel like I'm a little too overly concerned about how the child is doing or disconnected from just their presence in the moment and focused on other things that are happening in their life or other things that are happening in my life, like I can say in my head to myself real quick, like, the self is peace and I am myself, or like the self is me and I am myself. And I can feel it I can even feel it now as I just said it, like a little bit of grounding back into my own feelings and presence as a person. And I think that sometimes when we talk about parents connecting with kids, we talk about just like, okay, you got to pay more attention to your kids, right? You got to be active with them and interacting with them and all these other things. And those things are important, but I feel like they can often provide more pressure on parents. And parents are already pressured enough as it is, right? So stressed
Yeah.
out, so many different things to do, especially during this pandemic. And so I think that like whatever those ways are, it doesn't have to look for someone like a mantra in their head. You know, people have their own kind of grounding and recentering practices, but I think that being connected to yourself and being aware of what's going on inside of you both provides the child someone to regulate off of because you're in a regulated state. You're not just like focused on all these other things. And it also, I think, can help provide the space to connect back to your children if that's something that a parent is trying to do. So I like the sort of like the taking care of yourself first, the regrounding yourself first before then venturing out and opening your heart or opening your just awareness and attention to your children. I think that's something that I often want to throw into those kind of conversations like, about stuff like this.
That makes so much sense. And I think I was looking for an interaction piece, but everything, all therapeutics, human interaction, behavior, all goes back to taking care of yourself first. It seems from my conversations with all of you, really interesting professionals anyway. So put
Yeah,
your oxygen mask on first, right?
totally, totally. Yeah, and it's yeah, I mean, I think because we all just get more and more dysregulated the more we're asked to step further and further outside of ourselves. So yeah, it feels like I guess we're all saying that because I guess we're onto something with that. That connecting to yourself is
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. So you may have just said it, but if there is something within this conversation that you want our audience to take away, what do you think the most important thing would be?
Mm. I don't know. I mean, joy certainly, right? But I think, I guess in the work that I'm doing, I just have a lot of respect and appreciation for the way that kids go about interacting with their world. I think they're naturally tuned into this play state, and that from that play state, they're curious about things and they learn about things and they learn about themselves and life. And I think that we always want to have things that we offer to children and try to teach children. But I don't know, I feel pulled to raise up that like we can learn so much from them too. Like we can embody that sort of childlike openness to experience that I think can also help us out as adults. So that's maybe another thing I throw in on the end there is just I just think that children are really interesting beings. Watching a child develop is really interesting. And so if people do feel more curious about children, I ramble about it all the time and they can come check out Playtime if they want to.
That is perfect. And I always love rambling with you and chatting with you.
Hmm.
And today was no exception. So thank
Yeah.
you so much for being on Mindful Mornings. And if the audience wants to know more about your play therapy practice or your podcast, I'm going to put it all in the description to this video so they will have it at their
Sounds
access.
great. Sounds
Thank you,
great.
Andrew.
Thank you, Tracy. It was such a pleasure to talk to you today. Thanks for having me on.
Have a good one.
You too. See ya.